First and foremost, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. How was that intro?
Martin, thanks for having me, man. Did I send you that intro or did you kind of cobble some things together from the internet for that one?
I cobbled everything. So, yeah, you didn't send me any of that stuff. I went on LinkedIn. I went on yeah, but I don't know if it's two different websites, but there was a couple of different links that it went to. I went to the Greater Full website. I checked out your wife's bio just to
Yeah,
kind of, the Veteran Made podcast. So I parceled together a lot of different things.
I love it, man. You did your research. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
First question: why is life great right now? And I know we were chatting before we started started recording, but yeah, why is life great?
Dude, life is great right now. I mean, right now at this moment where I'm standing in my bedroom, the sun is out and kind of pouring through these windows up here after I guess a bit of a holiday break where it's been kind of gray and rainy and snowy in certain parts of the country. And yeah, I mean it's great right now because the sun's out. And more generally speaking, it's great right now. My family and I, my wife, our daughter's about to turn 4. I'm not sure when this is going to go live, but she'll be 4 in a few weeks. And we're actually getting ready to put our house on the market in Richmond, Virginia and move back home to Columbus, Ohio, which we are very, very excited about. It's where both of our extended families are from. My wife and I both went to high school in Columbus, and she's a working director and executive producer, and I'm a working executive producer. We co-founded our production company / content agency / whatever the heck you want to call it. And she and I actually were just talking about it right before I logged on here. And yeah, man, life is great because we're getting ready to go home and plant our roots back where we grew up, where we have family, and we're really excited to take our work and take ourselves, our work and our lives back home and kind of see what we can build in the heartland. I spent a good chunk of my adult life outside of the military on the coasts in Los Angeles and New York. And I'm very grateful for those experiences because I was able to kind of learn the trade of film production, video production, photo production, and advertising from everybody that works in those kind of central locations, right? New York and LA to this field. And I'm very, very excited to help continue to democratize the industry and bring more opportunities to the flyover states in the Midwest and the South and other places where right now it's growing in other places, but Columbus in particular is a hotbed for business, for tech, and for sports and for startups, and sports and auto is one of our core verticals. And so yeah, man, life is great because I'm excited and energized to move home and build a strong foundation.
Oh, that's awesome. What day is your daughter's birthday?
February 11th.
That's my son's birthday.
Nice.
My son's going to be 6.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Your son's a crazy person too.
Oh my gosh. We always hear, I know you're probably military, so people say, we should negotiate with terrorists. I disagree. We should negotiate with terrorists. Just send like a group of like kids between the ages of like 3 and 6.
Yeah.
And we'll get whatever we like. We'll get the other countries will cave in.
Yeah, no doubt.
No,
Yeah, it's funny.
awesome.
We actually kind of ended up finding ourselves moving a little bit. And part of why we're going home is to go home and plant roots and build our strong foundation there. And we actually lived in Columbus during COVID for a little bit in Dayton, a little bit in Columbus. And but we've kind of found ourselves moving pretty much on her birthday, not every year because we've been in Richmond for 2 years, but her other birthdays, it's like, oh, we're kind of getting ready to move somewhere. So it's kind of funny. So you grew up like around a base, like what a base?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna guess somewhere in like the Midwest or like upper Midwest.
So I was born and raised in Oklahoma,
There you
but
go.
that's not where my family's from. It's just where my mom was pregnant when my dad got stationed there, and then shortly after, I think I was I don't know, maybe 4 when my dad retired from the army, and we just had stayed planted in Oklahoma.
That's
And then
funny.
I was 21 when I joined, and yeah, but
I should have said it out loud. I almost said Kansas. Like that's kind of what I meant. I had this like Midwest, like farther west, Midwest kind of feel to it, feel to you. And so that's Oklahoma's right there.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that because usually people think, and more, I guess it's when I meet people in person, they automatically assume just based on the way that I speak and the way I carry myself, they think I'm from the East Coast. I get that a lot.
No,
But I don't get the NASCAR driver though. That is a first. I get told that I look like a lot of people, but never the NASCAR driver.
Yeah, we won't name the NASCAR driver
No,
that
no.
I offended you by.
It's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's all good.
I've
Um,
actually got a funny picture of that guy with my wife. We did. I used to work with NASCAR for a long time. I'm not sure we'll talk about it or not, but I always give her a hard time and call him her boyfriend because we took a picture with him and he like had his arm around my shoulder like this, but then like had his arm around her waist, was like right here, you know. But no, he's a good guy.
so one specific question I wanted to ask you was how has military discipline supported your entrepreneurial goals? Because you talked about different companies and everything, and what from your military experience influenced your current ventures?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the number one piece for me is something that people do talk quite a bit about. Jocko has made it very famous. It's obviously military doctrine. It's not like he invented it, but he made it pretty famous, and it's something that other people are talking about now, which is the idea of decentralized command.
Yeah,
And when I enlisted in the military, I probably thought just like everybody else that the military is a very rigid place with rigid structures that requires rigid adherence to those structures. And obviously what I learned early, even in basic military training boot camp for the Air Force as an element leader, working for an MTI and working with my dorm chief and having the guide on bear and all these different things, is it's totally decentralized command. So there are goals and there is a mission, and there are obviously ROEs. And if you're working on the flight line like I did, eventually there's technical orders and there's checklists and there's things
yeah,
that you need to follow in order to ensure that you're doing things as safely as you possibly can as a warfighter, which probably sounds funny, um, but it's not like, hey, do this, go there, do this, sit and wait. It's like, no, hey, here's the mission, here's the parameters, go get it done with the team that you're on within the unit that you're assigned to. And so I learned that really early. An example from my second deployment, I worked as a bomb loader, load towed on F-15E models, and I deployed once to Bagram, and then did a couple of TDYs in between, and then was getting ready to deploy a second time to Bagram. And I got put on a new crew, and in the weapons world, for fighters, each airframe is a little bit different. For fighters, you work on crews of three. So you have a 1-man, a 2-man, a 3-man. The 1-man is usually a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant. The 2 and 3-man are anywhere from airman basic all the way up to senior airman, kind of depending on rank and time and service and all that stuff. And I was very competent on the airframe. I had worked on it for a couple of years. I had deployed, I'd done TDYs, did a bunch of different dog and pony shows for USAFE and the command and everything. And so I was very good at the 3-man job. But I obviously didn't have enough time in service to have my 5 level or even my 7 level. And so I was the most experienced person on my crew in on my second deployment, but I was the lowest rank. And so my mentor at the time, who was my flight chief, was ultimately not able to go on that deployment. And so he set me aside before we went on that deployment. And he said, hey, man, I'm sending you on this deployment because you're on this crew number 52. He goes, I need you to lead that crew without being the 1-man, without being the 7 level, without being the 5 level, without being the guy who holds the TO and the checklist. You're the guy driving the jammer, and you have those responsibilities that are part of your 3-man responsibilities, but I'm tasking you with leading this crew and teaching them how this airframe works. The 1-man came from B-52s, and the 2-man came from F-16s, I think, maybe came from A-10s. So they obviously had experience on the flight line, experience in the career field, experience in life and in the military, but they didn't have experience in the airframe. And so it was up to me to learn how to lead this crew from behind as the 3-man and get through that deployment. And we ended up being one of the most prolific load crews on the deployment. We got the most alerts and scrambles and all that stuff. And ended up being just a really great framework and microcosm for me to learn that lesson of decentralized command, that age old adage that having influence without having authority is a very, very important life and job skill. And obviously you don't want to be an about it.
Yeah.
And so I learned that lesson pretty well on that deployment. And that's something I carried with me as I scaled my career in film production.
I actually have that in my notes about your deployment. I'll tell you my notes. A few of my notes is deployed twice to Afghanistan, participated in NATO operations throughout Europe with allied militaries. And yeah, I got a lot of cool stuff. So thanks for sharing that story because I was
Yeah,
going to
man,
get to that. So,
for sure.
uh, so my podcast, it's I just happen to be in the military, but it's not necessarily like an Air Force specific in the Air Force. But it's not an Air Force specific podcast. Um, I have a lot of active duty military and veterans who listen to my podcast. But uh, what have you just since you've got out of the military and you're now on this side of it? What is it? And you've worked in different industries, especially like in Hollywood. What have you found to be common misconceptions about military veterans?
Yeah, I mean that first one, that idea of rigid adherence to structure is the number one misconception
Yeah.
without a doubt. So I'm not gonna beat that horse because he's dead. But it is a big one. It is a big one. It's something I've run into quite a bit in different ways, right? Like I've run into it positively and I've run into it negatively, right? I've run into it positively where people just make assumptions and they say like, "Oh, you were in the military, so you're punctual and you're always early and you're respectful and you're well dressed. You're this and you're that and you always have a haircut. You never look out of place. Blah blah blah." And like, yeah, those are generally good things, but it's also not that simple, as you know, Martin. And then on the negative side of things, I've run into it where I had a job probably four or so years into my career in production and advertising, where I was working for these guys that were running a very small agency, and I was working across a couple of big accounts with them as a producer, and I was doing a little bit of writing, I was doing a little bit of producing, I was doing a little bit of directing, and I was getting mentored by an executive producer, and I took the executive producer's bosses out, right? Like, back to quick aside, in the military, this, especially in the Air Force, like you're always doing dog and pony shows for generals and
Yeah.
for politicians, right? And so back when I was going through selection, I did a lot of dog and pony shows, and then back when I was doing my job in on the flight line, we had to get qualled every month, and so I would do dog and pony shows for generals from USAFE and senior enlisted and diplomats and all that stuff. As long as you're standing at parade rest and you're being respectful, you can have a conversation with anybody, right? And they teach us that in basic anyway. They say stand at parade rest or attention, answer the question, say sir, ma'am, and as long as you're doing those things, like, you're not going to get in trouble. They're just human beings
Yeah.
that you're having a conversation with. They might be very high up on the hierarchy, up the chain of command, but they're still just people, and we learned that pretty early on in basic training. And so I took this guy's bosses out, and the guys who owned this agency, and I'm like, hey, I'm seeing success working on these accounts at this level, doing a little bit of everything. I really want to get to this executive producer role. You know, and I'm getting mentored by the current executive producer. I'm not saying I want to steal his job, but I want a job like his somewhere else. Help me out. What do you think I can do? I started asking some questions, and this guy's response was, well, you're really, really good at the logistical stuff. You were in the military, and we really think that skill set is very helpful to what you're doing now. And so I think you should just kind of stay where you are. I don't really think there's a straight line for you to draw from kind of where you are now to where this other person is. Like, it's just I don't think that's really in the cards for you. I think you're really good at what you're doing right now, man. Just like stick to that. You'll be really, really good. And it pissed me off because I'm like, you're just making an assumption about the way I do my job now and where I come from in terms of my experience in the military, and just you're making all these assumptions. Now, what I was absolutely open to at that moment, but I did not get, was coaching and teaching. And hey, here's what you're good at. Here's what you're not good at. Here's what he does that you don't actually see that you need to be able to do. And here's what I think we can do to help you bridge that gap and learn these new skills. They didn't say any of that. If they had said that, I would have been probably a little bit hurt and maybe a little bit pissed off, but I still at least would have had something tangible to take away. And I didn't get that, right? I just got this, well, you're in the military, so you're good at logistics. You should just kind of stay where you are and keep it moving. And so that's not a direct answer to your question, but it is kind of one of those things where there's this just assumption that because you did a certain job a certain way, even if you were a door kicker or an operator, anybody who like does the cool high speed shit, like, I don't make an assumption that just because you did those things, you can or can't do anything else. Like, I mean, I mentor guys and gals who listen to the podcast who did a myriad things in the military and want to go do something totally different. And what they did in the military has no bearing on what they can do in the future. The important pieces are the experiences and the way that we frame them from the military that gives us the opportunity to kind of like execute job skills, not technical skills, but more of like job skills and life skills that can propel us forward in any industry. And so there's this kind of almost, like George Bush used to say, this kind of like soft bigotry of low expectations. It's just like, oh, you're in the military, so you just, yeah, no, we want you in our organization because thank you for your service. And it's really important, and we kind of want your insight in some stuff, but just kind of stay where you are. This scalable career is not something that that it seems like a lot of people are open to.
Is that something? My voice just cracked. Is that something you found that military veterans discuss between themselves? They don't necessarily discuss with civilians, or if not, is there something else, and that takes place for that conversation?
It's a great question. And it's something that I've grown to become really passionate about. And it's this. That's not their fault. They're ignorant. They don't know any better. And I'm not saying that to put them down. I'm not saying that to be rude. I'm telling you, the military member, it is on you to figure out how to translate your skills and your experiences and tell your story about how you can get from where you are to where you want to be. You cannot rely on anybody else. I've been saying this a lot recently, and people are going to probably roll their eyes because a lot of people in our community aren't happy about it. But the Department of Defense is excellent at indoctrinating us into it because it should be. It is terrible at preparing us for life after service, and it should be. It should not be good at preparing us for life after service. The Department of Defense has one job and one job only, and that is to fight wars. It is not to prepare us to be civilians again. That's on us. Now, it's not on just us individually to like sit in our challenges or our trauma or the myriad things that come along with 4 to 20 plus years of service in the military. But we need to create community with and for each other. We need to engage with nonprofits. We need to engage in the private sector and the free market. And we need to go do these things with and for each other and not rely on this large entity to do it, right? And so that's one piece, the kind of where you come from, the DoD, your branch, whatever it is. The other piece is, if you're going to move forward and figure out how to tell your story, then it's on you to tell your story to people like me. I told my story to that guy. I said, here's what I want to do. And his response indicates to me now, looking back, that I didn't do a good enough job telling my story. It's not that he doesn't understand. It's that I didn't help him understand. And so I think that's a big one right now in our community where people are upset, and rightly so in certain circumstances. Obviously, when it comes to some of the physical traumas and mental and emotional traumas, that's a little bit different. When our service was, when someone's service directly injures them, then yeah, the DoD has a responsibility to ensure that person gets the treatment that they need and that they deserve for what they did in service. But the rest of it, professional transition, TAPS, all that stuff, nah, man, like you got to go do that yourself.
That's a great perspective, and I'd never considered that, but you're right. Like, people expect the military to automatically prepare them for life outside the military, and it's like, no, the military is preparing you for life in the military.
Yeah.
And I'd like for you to elaborate more, because an actual topic or question I had was, what's your advice to veterans that are struggling mentally and emotionally post-military with detachment? Because there's a lot of people, they struggle so much the minute they retire from the military, because the military is who they were or who they are.
Yeah.
Their rank, and they don't know what to do without their rank, or they don't know how to function because that's what gave them purpose. Or and I've seen a lot of people. I've been in for 21 years, and I've seen this so many times throughout my career. But yeah, do you mind elaborating?
Yeah, I mean, I want to establish again up front that if you have emotional trauma from sustained combat or injuries or assault or something that happened to you,
Yeah.
this is not what I'm talking. I'm not saying that you have to figure that out yourself at all. As I host my podcast, which we'll talk more about, I'm starting to have more conversations with mental health professionals and individuals that operate within that space. And one reason why it took me so long to start talking to some of those folks is because it's not my area of expertise. I'm very lucky. I haven't not sustained any of those injuries or traumas. So I don't have them myself. So I'm very lucky. So I'm a little bit ignorant on that front. So just as a caveat, I know some people might pull snippets from this and put it on the internet or whatever, but for those listening, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with folks that have actually experienced trauma. But to answer your question, and remind me, the question is people that are struggling emotionally and mentally coming out of the military in terms of attachment to their identity.
Yeah, or like specifically, I said, what is your advice to veterans that are struggling mentally and emotionally post-military with detachment?
Yeah. So military service is an odd thing in that it does consume your life when you're doing it, right? And I think for those of us that served for like 4 years or for 6 years, experience it in a more concentrated way than those of you who have done it over the course of a career, because you have an entire life, right? You end up getting married and having kids and buying and selling houses and PCSing and moving and doing all these things that I didn't do, right? I did 4 years, 1 year in Texas, 3 years in England, a couple deployments and some TDYs, and it was highly concentrated, right? So when I got out of the military, I didn't really think much about it. Like um, I didn't associate myself or attach myself with the identity of being a veteran. It just was kind of something that I was. So I knew I was going to use the GI Bill. So I went to Ohio State and made sure that I was enrolled in my GI Bill benefits with the VA and but that was the extent of it. I didn't really think of myself as a military student. It wasn't until I started to have the experiences of a military student who is considerably older than his classmates, and connecting with professors more than connecting with classmates, and then realizing that all your friends from high school are graduating from college and they're getting their entry level jobs and they're doing it. It wasn't until then that I started to realize, oh man, 4 years in the military is like, that could be a setback if you let it, because you're going through things with people that you can't necessarily relate as much to, and the people that you can relate to have more money than you, because like they've gone to college and they're getting their jobs and they're doing the different things, or they're kind of going off on their own routes and things like that. So I mean, my advice is to, oh man, and I hate giving advice, but my advice is to do your best to understand yourself and who you are and what you believe outside of the military, and then try to understand and look at that person that went through the military almost from that detached standpoint, and look back at that person and don't judge that person. I mean, there's a lot of things I did in the military that I don't do now. Everything from drinking monsters and smoking cigarettes to partying too hard and all of that stuff. And I don't look back at that person and judge that person. I just look back at that person and say, all right, well, those are the experiences that person had. Here are the things here's who I am now and what I believe, and how do I kind of make sense of that, right? And I actually posted something on Instagram and LinkedIn this morning, which was it's your choice whether or not to, and this was through the lens of entrepreneurship. It's like, it's your choice whether or not to be an entrepreneur or sit within a corporate hierarchy, or be an artist, or be whatever. It's your choice to be whatever it is that you want to be. But your choices come with responsibilities, and those responsibilities are to know who you are, know what you like and what you don't like, know what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and know how you want to work. The last piece is to live in alignment with the answers to all 4 of those questions. So if you can know who you are, what you like and what you don't like, what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and know how you want to work and kind of what kind of environment you want to be in, then you can figure out how to live in alignment with those things. That'll answer most of the basic questions that you have, probably outside of the spiritual ones.
That's great, man. I appreciate. We're not going to call it advice. We'll call it just knowledge.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge, right? Hey, you mentioned your podcast, and I just want to use that as kind of a segue to your podcast. So
Sure.
just please talk about Veteran Made podcast.
Yeah, man. Veteran Made is a project that it's a brand that I am building. I am, as of this recording, I've recorded 78 episodes, getting ready to record 79 next week, with my wife, actually, who's going to be on the podcast.
And you started when? How long you've had this out?
Yeah. So I started the podcast in 2021,
Nice.
January of 2021. So, I mean, the long and the short of my career, I went to film school. I promise this is all related. I won't take up too much time with it. But the long and the short is I went to film school. I went to LA. I went to New York, started working in advertising, had that conversation that I've already described with that guy where I'm working at a really strong mid-level opportunities and I'm trying to work my way up into senior leadership. And I was told what I was told. The next stop on my career journey was with an advertising agency that was slightly bigger than the one that I was working at, but still pretty small, 25 people. And I got hired as a producer to work there. And I worked directly for the founding partner and who was the chief operating officer, director of operations, and director of production. And for those that don't know, in the kind of creative space, production is the actual making of final assets. So strategists will kind of build the reasons why you might need a social media campaign or a TV campaign or an online video campaign or whatever it is. The creative teams are the ones who ideate it and art direct it and kind of like, here's what we want to do. And we're going to tell the production people how to actually, like, what we want this thing to look and feel like, right? So as a producer at an advertising agency, you're in charge of that pillar and ensuring that you're the liaison between the creative team and the account team who runs the client operations and ensuring that every asset gets made. So TV commercials, online videos, digital banners, social media assets, you name it, right?
Yeah.
And so so they hired me to do that. The director of operations, about 6 months onto the job, we're about 6 months into COVID, 9 months into COVID. And he's like, hey, you're doing a great job. We love your military frameworks and we love that you're not militaristic. Literally the opposite of everything the guy before said, right? They're like, we love what you do. We love how you do it. People enjoy working with you. You seem to enjoy working here. Do you want to take over the department from me because I don't want to do production anymore. I just want to do operations and I want to help scale this business. And I was like, dude, yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I was wholly unqualified. I had never run a department before. I had never been an executive producer before. I'd only ever been like a senior producer, mid-level producer, punching up to senior. So I was excited at the opportunity to do that. And it struck me. It struck me that they had such a different response to my military frameworks and my approach to running my side of the business as the people before. And so that question made me wonder if there was something there to explore. And so I tinkered with a bunch of different ideas. I thought about maybe making like a tech platform where military veterans could get jobs in marketing and advertising. But I don't want to code. I don't want to oversee people that code. Like, I'm not interested in that. And I just kept coming back to what I do already, which is create content, right? Write, speak, listen, film, video, all that stuff. And so I was like, what if I started a podcast, just what our community needs, right? Another podcast, another coffee company, another t-shirt company. I
Yeah.
was like, what if I start a podcast and I talk to other veterans who've done something similar to me in a creative or an entrepreneurial field so that I can ask them the questions that I'm trying to ask of myself, which is, how the did you figure this out? You were an Army Ranger and then you became a journalist and a filmmaker. You were an emergency medical tech in the ER in Baghdad, and now you're a PR agent. Like, what? How did you do those
Yeah.
things? Right. And those are two actual examples from people who've been on the podcast. Right. So that's what I did. I started the podcast, and my employer at the time was super supportive of it. And so I spent the next couple of years interviewing people, DMing people on LinkedIn, DMing people on Instagram. My dad had a SEAL working for him at the time who was kind of like his director of training for the business curriculum that my dad's firm was using. And obviously curriculum I'm familiar with because it's my dad's material. And so, it's like, and stuff I know plus a Navy SEAL, So we created one episode, and then I took that, chopped up into 9 pieces of content, and posted it from there, and then built the Instagram and just kind of clawed my way into people's DMs and onto people's feeds to try to secure some guests, and built a nice little guest list, kind of brick by brick. At the end of 2022, I was like, all right, man, enough dicking around on this. I had taken enough time and energy and devoted it to it that I'm like, if you're going to do this, you got to do this. So for 2023, calendar 23, I set the goal of 52 episodes in 52 weeks, one episode a week, for an entire year. And it's January 12th, 2024 right now. And I did that last year.
So for the first 2 years of the podcast, you roughly had, I guess, 20 something episodes then. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah. It was like, I mean, I do one like every 9 weeks, every 12 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly my story, except I had fewer episodes.
Yeah.
No, I applaud you, man. It's impressive because just within the past like 3 months, or whenever I initially reached out to you, I think back in late November, man, it's impressive. And I started researching you and to see all that you've accomplished. It's incredible, man. I applaud you. I clap for you. I'm proud of you as just a veteran and just as a fellow creator, man. It's impressive. Just something I can learn from.
Thanks, man.
Your editing it's on point. It's really good. And shout out to Jenna Carlton from the Millennial Veteran, because that's actually the episode or how you first. That's when I first learned about you.
Jenna's great. I love Jenna. She and I have become friends, and I'm going to be going on her show, I think next month or maybe the month after, and do one of those Sunday night things, which I'm excited about. And yeah, man, the biggest thing for me is like I've loved building this community of people who are approaching things the way that I like to approach things, and not because I want to get in some kind of like echo chamber or a bubble, but more of like to work with like-minded people who are trying to move our community forward in a way that's positive and practical. I mean, that's the big thing for me is the practicality of the content. Like the last thing I joke about, the last thing our community needs is another podcast or another coffee company or t-shirt company, right? But it's like, what I will say is the last thing our community needs is, well, 2 things. We don't need, hold on a second. You can edit this part out if you need to. My wife's making bacon downstairs. It's up.
Oh,
We had this, or you can leave it in. I don't know if it's going to.
I'm going to leave it in because this podcast is on fire. This is how good it is.
Right.
This is all the knowledge you're dropping is on fire.
This is why we're selling the house and moving. No, I'm just kidding. We have this, just the oven is really, the smoke detector is really good at detecting the what do they call nitrates in bacon? Is that what they call it? Yeah. But the last thing, from a podcast, all joking aside, from a podcast perspective, what our community does not need any more of are 2 things. 1, cool guy story podcasts, right? Operators telling stories about doing daring missions where they rescue people or shoot people in the face, or both. Those are awesome. I'm very glad that those podcasts exist. I'm very glad that those guys go do what they do. I'm very glad that professionals such as yourself provide them with the tools and intelligence that they need to go do those things. But we don't need any more podcasts about that. Yeah. The other thing we don't need any podcasts about is a bunch of like, I want to make you feel better about yourself and your service. No. I want to help empower you to live and work better. Live a better life, work a better job. Whatever that is for you, whatever that means to you, that's the kind of content that I want to be creating. And if it ever stops being practical, I need you and anybody else to check me and say, hey man, you're drifting into cool guy territory or you're drifting into woo-woo positivity territory because that episode didn't help me do anything. I want you to be able to pull things away from an episode that are tangible and practical that you can go put into use right now. Today, not tomorrow, today. Go do something that you learned from an episode, right? And that's kind of, I'm actually working on a part of the project with the podcast where I'm trying to actually build that content library. So right now it exists on Instagram. You can go to the Instagram feed, but you got to go all the way down to the bottom to see all the. So I'm trying to figure out how I can actually take all those IG reels, that IG reel content, and actually build it into a library on the website so people can access by topic. We don't need motivation. We need momentum. You need to build momentum because motivation will. I know this sounds like one of those hired speakers that would come in and I know how it sounds, but it's also true. It's a truism. Motivation will dissipate. momentum can build. Momentum is something that you can build. Motivation is something that's going to go away. I'm not motivated to go ruck and go do pull-ups and push-ups right after this, but that is what I'm going to do because I have to go build momentum for the rest of the day.
You have to check out. I did one of my earliest episodes of the podcast, maybe like episode 6. I did Dr. Benjamin Hardy, but he's against the whole idea of willpower, and very early, very raw audio from that early on episode. It's from 2018. But yeah, it's great. Just again, and he has since written so many books and stuff like that. But anyway, it's a good one. Before we close out, I want to ask some miscellaneous questions. They have
I've got some more. I've got a little bit more time, by the way. If you have more stuff, I know I talk a lot, so I don't.
No, it's good, man. I'm loving it. I just want to be respectful, but I do have some miscellaneous questions. They're in no particular order.
Okay.
And just fun, right? So there's no rhyme or reason. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, until the fire alarm goes off again. Yeah. Which historical figure do you identify with?
Oh, dude, that's a great question. Identify with?
Mm-hmm.
Damn, that's a great question. Wow. I've never thought about it in those terms. Like, I know the ones I'd want to meet, or I know the ones I'd want to have dinner with, or I know who do I identify with? Huh. So this is going to sound weird and probably arrogant, because the reason why I identify with him is not because I have any ambition for these things or because of like what he actually accomplished, but because of the character that that Lin-Manuel Miranda created, which I would say would be Alexander Hamilton. So I listened to that soundtrack right when it came out. I'm a big, obviously being in the arts and being in film and stuff around theater a lot. So I've always enjoyed musical theater, and I love music. I've always loved hip hop. And so I listened to the soundtrack when it came out right away, and then watched the Disney Plus thing. And I've actually since seen it on stage. And I love the character. So whether it's the historical figure or the character, the version that Lin created for the show, but that version of Alexander Hamilton, I very much relate to every time I listen to that soundtrack or hear any of the songs or see any of those things. Which the early version of him in the play, right, where he has all of this ambition to do great things and wants there to be a war so that he can go fight in it, and wants there to be a struggle so that he can struggle against it, wants there to be things that he can write about and do. And I loved the kind of authenticity that he wrote into that play with who Hamilton's character actually was in real life, and then how it can compare to those of us that are in the arts and that are content creators and that want to go do great things. And you have to understand that what you're asking for is a very dangerous thing to ask for. The opportunity to do great things has danger associated with it.
So I did a past, I was going to say earlier this year, but it was in August of 2023 with Shane Pilgrim, retired Air Force entrepreneur now. Fantastic episode. He talks about transitioning out of the military, and it's a must. If you listen, that's a great episode just for anyone.
Of your podcast? Of this one?
Yeah. Shane Pilgrim. Maybe episode 37. Did you make that shot? Did you stow that?
It's on my bed, so it was just I made it. If I would have missed it, it'd have been really bad.
Yeah. Anyway, great episode, but more importantly, I met him at it was during the Air Force Sergeants Association conference. Yep. And he was a guest speaker, phenomenal. But he talked about entrepreneurship for military veterans, and it was anyway very insightful. But and he's a tall guy, but throughout the speaking, he's wearing a suit. But I noticed his socks. He's wearing Alexander Hamilton socks, and he has this whole story behind it.
Oh, cool!
And, so I met him, talked to him after that briefing. We did the podcast 2 hours later, but then the first question I asked him was like, talk to me about your Alexander Hamilton socks. And I just thought, because you just don't see that, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about people in history, we talk about, even if it's someone that's a non-president, we talk about Ben Franklin or Thomas Edison or someone like that. Never really Alexander Hamilton. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, we miss out on what I love about that, not to make this a fanboy thing for the show or for Lin, but like just the humanity of Hamilton's character. Like, he desperately wanted to be famous, and he desperately wanted to be respected, and he desperately wanted to be powerful, and he desperately wanted to do all these things. But he also actually wanted to do a really good job at all of the things that he did. He wrote into existence this country, right, and the humanity with which that entire play displays all of those people, and especially Hamilton. I don't think we have enough of that anymore. To your point, right, we tend to lionize certain great people and forget about their darker qualities. And in reality, we just we're all humans trying to make our way through this world. So
another random question is, what do you order at a bar?
that's a good question. What kind of bar are we at?
Okay, let's say you're back
are
in
we
New
at a
York
cocktail
City.
bar? Are we at a sports bar? What are we at? What are we at?
All right, so good. Good. Let's get. Let me go deeper. We're in New York City, and you're at some advertising business dinner or something, or whatever, meeting someone, a client, for drinks. You go to the bar to order a drink. What do you order?
In that instance, I'm doing an old fashioned.
Okay, because I'm getting like a Mad Men vibe. Yeah. That's how I'm picturing. It's an old fashioned.
Yeah, but I'll answer the question in a few different ways. So if I'm at a dive bar, I'm getting a Tullamore Dew neat,
okay,
which is an Irish whiskey for those that don't know. A real one. It's great. You get it neat. It's nice and warm at a dive bar. It's incredible. If I'm at just like a regular happy hour, I'm getting a margarita. If I'm at a business happy hour, or if it's winter, I'm getting an old fashioned. And if it's a sports bar, I'm getting a Coors Light.
Okay. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
I like that. Last two questions. All right. Since you're a filmmaker, if someone were to make a movie about you, who would direct and film the movie about you?
Oh, who would direct it?
Yeah, who would? Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask me who would play me, and that would just put me in a really awkward position to name some super handsome actor.
No, I mean, clearly it's Ryan Gosling or Ryan Reynolds, but yeah. See how this goes? How this goes? You throw clearly no. I mean, it wouldn't be the military. It wouldn't be. It's like you. That's like someone. You see people for stolen valor and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I feel like I could spot stolen valor right away, because to me, part of being in the military, we just met virtually, never in person, but right away we're busting each other's balls, right? And to me, that's a total military thing. If we're at a bar, and if you and I are grabbing a drink, right, and there's some army guys there, and we're talking trash to one another about the service, they're calling us chair force, and we're calling them grunts, right? Just jawing at each other. And if someone else were to come in and make fun of us, and it's whoa, why are you making fun of these army guys, right? Instant. There's something that, whether you're active military or prior military, that instantly just brings you together and in a good way defend one another. But I used to always ask throughout a lot of podcasts, hey, if there's, and I even recently I've asked this question, if there's a movie made about the life, what would the name of the movie be, and who would play that person? But I find that people ask that question a lot now on podcasts. I'm just trying to try something different, but yeah, I thought this one's fitting for you.
I dig it. My answer is Jeff Nichols. He made the movie. He's a writer, director. He's probably outside of Taylor Sheridan, who does Yellowstone and Sicario and all of those, he's probably my favorite screenwriter. But my favorite writer director is Jeff Nichols. He did the film Mud with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
He did a film called Loving, which was about Mildred Loving and her husband, about integration of marriage in the state of Virginia. Black woman and a white man fell in love. Great, incredible film. Great documentary that he made it off of too, but great film. He made a film called Midnight Special, which is this kind of interesting cult / sci-fi / family drama with Joel Edgerton and Sam Shepard and Kirsten Dunst.
Wow.
And he's done a couple of other things too. He's got this movie coming out this year with Tom Hardy, about a bicycle gang in Chicago, I think in the 50s or something like that.
Yeah, I just saw I went to go see Iron Claw recently, the wrestling movie. Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah, I love it. And now, granted, on a side note, I was born and raised in Oklahoma. And I've watched pro wrestling pretty much my whole life.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, in Oklahoma, Texas territory, and back then wrestling was very much about the region.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Von Erichs were legends. Like, to put it in perspective for anyone not familiar, the Von Erichs were in that region, the popularity wise, like what The Rock is now. I mean, they were so iconic. So for me, it was really cool just to kind of go back into a time machine and relive some of these memories I had from my childhood. But yeah, it's great. But anyway, that Tom Hardy movie is one of the previews, and it looks very good.
I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, that's the filmmaker. He's a writer, director, Jeff Nichols. He writes kind of across all these different genres. He's super. I think he's from Arkansas. Take Shelter is another one that he did early in his career, with actor whose name I'm blanking on right now, but I'll think of it. But yeah, great writer, director. Kind of love him. That kind of like indie film feel, but also like really good. I mean, I love indie films. I love like A24, right? They're the ones who put out the Von Erich film. And I love those kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, Jeff Nichols would be my specific answer, but any one of those people who make those quirky indie dramedies, like that's I think what the genre of my life would be.
No, it's good. And I'm gonna say it'd be the A24 studio that would
distribute it.
Distribute it.
Yeah,
I like the way that was filmed and everything too. It was just great. It was great. All right, last couple of questions. If you could have one billboard anywhere in the world, with your leadership message on it for the world to see, where would the billboard be, and what would the message say?
It's a great question. The where part is throwing me off, so I'll answer the what would it say first, which is stop thinking, start moving. And I think it would be geographically in, man, it's a good question. I don't know, man. Times Square, I guess, right?
Okay.
That's what's going to get the most views. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, that's the thing. That's the kind of the kick I'm on right now is stop thinking, start moving. The best thinking happens while we're doing things, not while we're thinking. And I think more people need to hear that. That's actually why it's one of the reasons why I think people do podcasts is like I will request the transcript from you and request my side of this recording on Riverside so I can have it. Cause I want to go back and like, well, I wasn't doing anything other than just speaking with Martin. So I'm going to learn things that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to think about or say on my own because it wasn't in this dynamic conversation. So yeah.
All right, last two questions. By the way, for your billboard, where it would be, you said Times Square. We'll have it right next to the old school Mark Wahlberg, Calvin Klein, where he's in his underwear.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll have your picture, like your billboard in the middle. So the Mark Wahlberg, Calvin Klein on one side, and the picture with you, your wife, and the NASCAR driver.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. On the other.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So the last two questions is, and it's a one-word response, but I just do listening to various episodes of your podcast and watching your content, reading your content. What I have found that your goals are. So what I asked is, I'm going to read off some of the goals, and I just want you to summarize that in one word. So what I have found your goals, what I have in my notes, is to have for your podcast, to have a through line of the podcast, focus on relationships and work, to serve and be served by others, and focus on what's right in front of you versus looking too far in the future. So what's one word you would use to summarize all that?
Movement.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And last question, where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram at Veteran Made Pod. LinkedIn, Carey Kight, CareyKight. Those are the two places that I primarily communicate. Virtually the same assets and communications you'll kind of find on both platforms, depending on where you like to operate. I do a little bit more on LinkedIn than I do on Instagram, just because LinkedIn kind of affords you the opportunity to write more long form type stuff. I've dropped the YouTube channel. I had a YouTube channel, but I'm actually just going to move everything over to LinkedIn. So I'm going to start putting up some kind of longer form videos and different things on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are the two big places. But yeah, I mean, the website is veteranmadepod.com. You can reach me there, find my email address, or fill out the form and shoot me an email. DM me on IG or on LinkedIn. Shoot me a follow on LinkedIn, and yeah, take the conversation there.
No, that's it, man. That's all I have. But man, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you're on my podcast, and I've said it multiple times. Just keep it up, because you're gonna you'll be 10x a year from now than where you are right now. And I'm telling you right now, I can see it. It's very obvious to me. So I'll be proud to say, like, hey, that guy was a guest on my podcast, and we were talking about Red Bull and Calvin Klein underwear. But the
well,
no, man.
Listen, I appreciate that. And I've in a past life, I was not very good at accepting compliments like that. So I will just say thank you, and that I appreciate it. And that I appreciate that you have listened to the show. I appreciate that you invited me on. I appreciate you did the research that you did. And yeah, man, I would love to do it again sometime. And I hope what you said is true. And I hope that also we'll maybe come back in a year and we'll do another episode together, and the size and scope doesn't matter.